Thank you, Senator, for that question. I consider it to be an academic article, publication of 16, 17 years ago, a scholarly piece.
Yeah, let's dig into it a little bit. You write in your paper that to combat allegations of elitism, recent Republican presidents have adopted anti-intellectualism. Mm-hmm. How would you define anti-intellectualism?
And if I am confirmed as Archivist of the United States, I look forward to welcoming all Americans to the National Archives.
So, do you think that people who voted for Donald Trump are anti-intellectual?
That is not my view. My view was focused on his rhetorical capabilities.
That's not what your sentence says. Listen, you wrote an article saying basically that Republican voters are stupid, that Republican presidents deliberately appeal to anti-intellectualism. You rolled it all up in this thing called Republican populism, yet you're trying to present yourself here as a nonpartisan. In fact,
in today's highly polarized political climate, even traditionally neutral government roles are increasingly viewed through a partisan lens. One such role is the Archivist of the United States, who leads the National Archives and Records Administration, NARA, the agency responsible for preserving the nation's historical and government records. Once seen as a low-profile position, it has come under political scrutiny following controversies over the handling of presidential records, particularly those involving President Donald Trump. In this context, President Biden's nominee for the role, Dr. Colleen Shogan, faced a tense confirmation hearing before the Senate Homeland Security Committee.
You're recognized for your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me start with you, Shogan, if I could. You have talked throughout today's hearing so far and in your pre-hearing Q&A about how much it's important to be a nonpartisan leader. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
And so if you're confirmed, you will attempt to stay politically neutral in your decision-making. Is that fair to say?
Yes, Senator.
Fair characterization of your views, I should say.
Yes, yes.
So I was troubled, I have to say, by this article that you wrote that Senator Portman asked you about a minute ago, published by the American Political Science Association. I have it here, Anti-Intellectualism in the Modern Presidency, Republican Populism, published in June of 2007. Do you consider this piece to be nonpartisan?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I consider it to be an academic article, publication of 16, 17 years ago, a scholarly piece.
Yeah, let's dig into it a little bit. You write in your paper that to combat allegations of elitism, recent Republican presidents have adopted anti-intellectualism. Mm-hmm. How would you define anti-intellectualism?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. The ability to speak in very plain, common sense terms to Americans.
So you say recent Republican presidents, but your case studies are Dwight Eisenhower and Ronald Reagan, mm-hmm. and then coming up, I think, to George W. Bush. Mm-hmm. So what's the point here? I mean, you say at one point Republicans tend to exhibit anti-intellectual qualities. Democrats, on the other hand, coalesce on the intellectual tail of the continuum. So is the point that Republicans are stupid and Democrats are intellectual?
Yes, thank you, Senator, for that question. Absolutely not. The point of the article is that the presidents that I featured in it have a rhetorical connection with the American people.
A rhetorical connection that you say is anti-intellectual, and you feature every two-term Republican president, going back to Dwight Eisenhower.
Yes, Senator, I think it's a piece on rhetoric, and it is really looking at how these presidents have been successful rhetorically in their arguments.
Interesting. It's a piece on rhetoric, but you attribute part of the anti-intellectualism of the Republican Party to, in your words, the rise of the religious right. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that. Is it because those voters are stupid?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. Absolutely not. And if I am confirmed as Archivist of the United States, I look forward to welcoming all Americans to the National Archives.
So do you think that people who voted for Donald Trump are anti-intellectual?
Thank you, Senator. I would not make any judgment on the people who voted for President Trump or any other president.
So you don't think the people who voted for Dwight Eisenhower or Ronald Reagan or George W. Bush, they weren't anti-intellectual? The anti-intellectual rhetoric just appealed to them because what? What's your theory?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. As I said, presidents are able to speak in common sense, plain terms to Americans that they understand.
So you characterize President Reagan as having, quote, less than impressive intellectual capacities. You said President Eisenhower and Bush were decidedly intellectual. You said Reagan engaged in intellectual posturing. Let's just start with the first one, less than impressive intellectual capacities. So in other words, it's dumb.
Thank you, Senator. Absolutely not. That was a perception, and it was cited.
I'm sorry, it's a perception by whom? By you? You wrote about it.
No, Senator, that was, and as I said, in the article, that is a perception, but actually in the article, because...
You say Reagan's less than impressive intellectual capacities have been widely discussed. That's presented as a factual statement. You don't even cite for it. This is on page 298. I have your article. Don't dissemble in front of me. So Reagan's less than impressive intellectual capacities have been widely discussed. You're not saying that he had less than, that's not your view?
Thank you, Senator. It is not my view.
Why did you write it?
Thank you, Senator. That is not my view. My view was focused on his rhetorical capabilities.
That's not what your sentence says. Listen, you wrote an article saying basically that Republican voters are stupid, that Republican presidents deliberately appeal to anti-intellectualism. You rolled it all up in this thing called Republican populism, yet you're trying to present yourself here as a nonpartisan. In fact, you're an extreme partisan, and your record shows that. You're someone who has denigrated Republican presidents, every two-term Republican president, I hope I'm not leaving anybody out, that has, since the Second World War, and their voters in this lengthy article. I mean, I just don't understand, if you wrote it, why won't you stand behind it?
Thank you, Senator. I will stand by my long experience for over 15 years of nonpartisan service.
You know, this is not just a theoretical set of questions, because as you know, we have seen what happens when you have political activists in the position that you are up for confirmation for. And we are living through that as a nation right now. We are living through the weaponization, the political weaponization of the National Archives, the political weaponization of the Department of Justice, the political weaponization of the FBI, such that half of the people of this country cannot trust those institutions. We're living with a president who calls half the voters of this country semi-fascists, who have said that they are a threat to democracy. This is an elected American president who makes these outrageous statements. So in that environment, frankly, to have you up for confirmation for this position, which has become very politically charged, in a way I lament. It should not have been, but unfortunately, the past archivists have done what they've done. The FBI has done what it has done. DOJ has done what they have done. And here you are talking about the anti-intellectualism and, frankly, stupidity of American voters.
A respected political scientist and public servant with over 15 years of nonpartisan government service, Dr. Shogan came under fire from Senator Josh Hawley, RMO, for a 2007 academic article she authored titled Anti-Intellectualism in the Modern Presidency, Republican Populism. In the article, she analyzed how Republican presidents like Eisenhower, Reagan, and George W. Bush used plain-spoken rhetoric to connect with voters, a strategy some scholars describe as anti-intellectual. Senator Hawley accused Shogan of suggesting that Republicans are unintelligent and claimed her views were incompatible with a nonpartisan role. Shogan firmly denied this interpretation, insisting the article was a scholarly analysis of political communication, not a partisan attack, and highlighted her long record of neutral public service. This exchange reflects broader tensions over academic freedom, political loyalty, and institutional trust, raising important questions about how scholarship is interpreted in the political arena and what qualifies someone for public leadership in a divided America.
I mean, if that isn't playing to type, I don't know what the world is. I mean, it's basically a self-parody. How can you assure me or anybody watching this hearing, the millions of Americans, 75 million Americans who voted for a Republican in the last election, how can you assure them that you will be truly nonpartisan, given what you have said over a period of years?
Thank you, Senator. I stand by my record of nonpartisan service at the Congressional Research Service, the Library of Congress, and at the White House Historical Association. And I invite anybody to talk to the people that I have worked with for years in my nonpartisan government service.
Mr. Chairman, without objection, I'd like to enter this article, Anti-Intellectualism in the Modern Presidency, Republican Populism. I'd like to enter it into the record.
Without objection.
I'd invite everybody to read this. You can read the words for yourselves. You can read the entire article for yourselves, and folks can make up their own minds. I think when they do, they'll be really disappointed. I'm deeply disappointed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.